in the quiet town of Clearwood. Rumors swirl about a nameless old bridge on the outskirts, a simple iron crossing over a narrow river bend. It doesn't appear on official maps, nor do locals include it on scenic trails. Yet the whisper of its existence draws a certain type of curiosity, the Bridge of Dread, people call it in hushed voices. Local stories claim that anyone who dares to cross it must confront the worst moment of their life. Some speak of regrets made flesh. Others mention tragedies destined to be unleashed. Most people dismiss the legend as nonsense, a mere ghost story to deter reckless night wanderers. Nova, a recent graduate who grew up in Clearwood, was never one to believe easily in the town's folklore. She found the notion of a cursed bridge superstitious at best, but also discovered it oddly intriguing. After returning from college, Nova decided to investigate these rumors for a small blog project. She planned to collect stories of the dreaded crossing, interview townsfolk, and present a rational explanation for the supposed curse. Yet, as she inched closer to the truth, she found that no rational solution seemed to stick. The bridge's legend went deeper, overshadowing the usual tall tales that swirl in any small town. She first heard about the Bridge of Dread at a local diner. An elderly man, in between bites of apple pie, told Nova how he lost his best friend after they crossed that bridge together in their youth. He never spoke another word after that night, the man said. Eyes haunted. He'd seen something on that bridge. Something that tore him apart. The old man refused to elaborate further, ignoring Nova's questions. The hush around the topic unsettled her, even the diner's waitress, overhearing, paled at the mention of that structure. For Nova, it sparked curiosity and a tinge of excitement. She decided to unravel the myth once and for all, to discover if it was just an old local scare story or something more. Little did she know she was stepping onto a path that would challenge her understanding of fate, illusions, and the darkest corners of human fear. Nova started by scouring Clearwood's small library, searching local archives, scanning decades-old newspapers. She found references to an iron footbridge built in the early 1900s for logging routes. Many expansions in the region overshadowed it, leading new highways to bypass that old crossing entirely. Oddly, few official records mention it after 1950. But rumors in a local newsletter from the 1970s told of teenagers who vanished after a night of dares near the cursed bridge. Another piece recounted an older tragedy from the 1930s. A woman reportedly lost her mind after walking that bridge at twilight. The article ended abruptly. No follow-up details. Those scraps only stoked Nova's curiosity. She asked around, but most locals either pleaded ignorance or changed the subject with uneasy glances. A retired teacher, Miss Caldwell, hinted at knowledge, telling Nova, "That bridge has a presence. It forces you to see or experience your worst fear, your worst outcome. Folks who cross it sometimes re-emerge, trembling, and change." Miss Caldwell wouldn't say more, except that her father warned her never to go near it. She told Nova, "What's the point of risking it? There's no crossing so dire you'd gamble your entire soul." Yet Nova was a journalist at heart. She thought, if no one crosses it, then maybe it's just a legend. But the conflicting stories of vanishings, mere catatonic survivors, or unspoken horrors only stirred her sense of mystery. She resolved to find that bridge, document its condition, and gather first-hand accounts. Weeks passed before Nova finally found a lead on the bridge's location. A teenage boy, curious and rebellious, confided in her that he'd once stumbled upon an overgrown path near the old forest on the western edge of town. He swore he saw twisted iron railings bridging a narrow gorge. Spooked by rumors, he fled before setting foot on it. He gave Nova vague directions from the old sawmill, Follow the dirt trail behind the abandoned cabin. Keep left past 2 fallen pines. You'll see the ridge clearing. Armed with that clue, Nova drove out on a cool autumn afternoon, weaving her car down a potholed road that ended at the sawmill's rusted gate. She hiked on foot through tall grass and fallen leaves, passing crumbling cabins and thick undergrowth. The hush of the forest pressed in as she skirted around mossy logs. The wind carried a faint whistle, as though cautioning her to turn back. But each step forward felt inevitable. Eventually, after an hour of searching, she found a faint trail weaving downhill. At its end, she glimpsed a clearing in the trees, and there stood a narrow iron bridge spanning a rocky creek. Despite her mental preparation, her heart pounded. The structure's riveted beams were rusted brownish red, a battered plaque on one side unreadable. The bridge looked stable but old, each step of its walkway an invitation to rumored doom. The creek below, though not large, churned with surprising force among sharp rocks. Nova stared, half expecting some intangible dread to seize her. But nothing happened. The forest quiet remained. She exhaled, deciding to photograph it for her blog. She stepped closer. The air felt heavier near the bridge, a chill that had little to do with the autumn breeze. She could almost sense a watchful presence in the hush, as though the structure itself breathed. She dared not cross it yet. Instead, she retreated with her photos, determined to gather more info before testing the legend firsthand. Back in Clearwood, Nova showed her photos around. The few who recognized the spot blanched, urging her to destroy the pictures. Forget the place. That crossing is cursed, one older woman snapped. My aunt set foot on it decades ago. Saw a vision that drove her away from this town forever. Another man, stoic, just shook his head. Leave it alone, or it'll take from you something dear. Frustrated yet intrigued, Nova posted an anonymous piece on a local forum, seeking experiences from anyone who'd actually crossed the bridge. Responses ranged from ridicule to ominous hints. One message read, "I crossed it once. My nightmares came true days later. I nearly lost my life. This is no joke." Another user claimed her uncle died of a freak accident soon after crossing. The pattern seemed consistent: cross the bridge, face your worst possible fate. Nova wondered if these tragedies were self-fulfilling prophecy or real curses. She interviewed a local policeman, off the record, who admitted the department had old case files referencing missing persons near that area. Nothing conclusive, but enough to give her chills. The policeman added, "We always advise folks to stay off that old property. It's unsafe." But there's talk among the older officers about weird coincidences. Despite the growing dread, Nova's ambition flared. If she could capture the phenomenon, maybe even cross the bridge safely, she could produce a groundbreaking story, possibly unveiling how an entire town's fear shaped real events. Or maybe she wanted to disprove the supernatural once and for all. She decided to plan a crossing carefully, bringing a friend or two. Cameras, everything needed to document what happened. The question was, could she truly brace herself against the curse that forced her to face her worst nightmare? Nova confided in her best friend, Lena, a pragmatic, level-headed nurse who also disliked unproven myths. At first, Lena was dead set against it, claiming no curiosity was worth the risk. But after seeing how adamant Nova was, she reluctantly agreed to help. "We'll go in daylight. As soon as possible. We'll gather evidence. If it's nothing, we defuse a rumor. If something weird occurs, we'll handle it logically," Lena reasoned, though her eyes betrayed nerves. They chose a bright Saturday morning. The autumn sun glinted through thinning tree canopies as they approached in Nova's car. parked near the sawmill ruins. They hiked in silence, tension thick. Nova carried a phone camera and a voice recorder. Lena kept a first aid kit, out of caution and a steady moral presence. Soon, the forest parted, revealing the narrow iron span again. Even under bright sunlight, it exuded an unsettling aura. Leaves swirled across the walkway in an unfelt breeze. Nova proposed they cross together, so neither faced it alone. Heart pounding, she stepped onto the metal walkway. The iron groaned underfoot. Lena followed close behind. The center of the bridge offered a view of the creek below. Water shimmering. A scenic spot if not for the overshadowing gloom. They paused in the middle, half expecting a jolt of tragedy or a monstrous vision. But everything remained calm. Just the rustle of forest leaves. Nova exhaled in relief. "It's just a bridge," she muttered. Tension easing. Lena nodded wearily. They reached the far side, stepping onto the mossy trail. The curse, if it existed, didn't appear immediate. They turned to film short commentary. Nova's phone camera captured only quiet nature. She almost laughed at the anticlimax. But in the pit of her stomach, a stirring sense of dread welled, as though the worst was yet to come. That evening, after they returned home, subtle oddities emerged. Lena's cat hissed at her for no reason, arching its back. Nova's phone glitched, losing some recorded footage of the crossing. Both women brushed these off as minor coincidences. But over the next few days, the anomalies multiplied. Nova started experiencing nightmares of being trapped on the bridge at twilight. Water below turning blood red. A disembodied voice chanting her name. She woke sweating, the echo of that voice lingering. Lena, meanwhile, discovered an unexpected diagnosis in her workplace. A colleague dying from a freak infection. She couldn't shake the sense of encroaching doom. Each passing day hammered in the possibility that the crossing had set in motion events they couldn't outrun. Nova tried to bury herself in investigating historical records of prior crossers. She found an old diary excerpt from 1928 referencing someone who claimed to see their own grave while on the bridge, then died of unknown causes weeks later. Another from 1962 described a man who crossed out of arrogance, only to vanish in a boating accident soon after. The pattern was clear: the crossing forced individuals to meet their darkest fate, either physically or psychologically. Nova realized with chilling clarity she had likely triggered her own worst fear, and so had Lena. But what was that fear? For Nova, it might be losing a loved one or failing to protect someone. For Lena, perhaps it was causing harm inadvertently. The question, could they prevent these nightmares from becoming reality? Or was the road set? As the weeks progressed, the phenomena escalated. Nova's mother fell gravely ill out of the blue, despite having been healthy. Lena's fiancé encountered a near-fatal accident. Everywhere they turned, an undercurrent of dread followed them. Nova felt certain this was the curse punishing them for crossing. The once skeptical Nova now believed wholeheartedly that the legend was real, that the bridge extracted a dire cost. Desperate for answers, they returned to older townsfolk, seeking a clue to breaking the curse. One older woman, sorrowful, advised them to make amends at the bridge, offer something precious, or the worst will come. Another suggested they simply leave town, but other rumors indicated the curse followed anywhere. They even debated returning to the site, seeing if they could undo their crossing. Nova and Lena realized that for some unfortunate souls, the worst moment meant literal death. For others, it was psychological torment. If they let events unfold passively, something catastrophic might happen. But how to atone, or break a fate sealed by the crossing? With dread-laced hearts, They decided to revisit the bridge at dusk, like a final confrontation with the legend. They prepared a symbolic gesture, an offering of personal items representing what they cherished most. Lena brought the necklace her grandmother gave her. Nova carried an old photo of herself with her mother, symbolic of her deepest bond. The logic, gleaned from half-baked local lore, was that one might appease the bridging spirit by sacrificing something precious. If it worked, maybe the curse would relent. Twilight settled as they navigated the forest path. Leaves rustled underfoot, the sky shifting to a bruise-colored glow. They arrived at the bridge, dark and silent, crossing the creek's gentle roar. The iron frame loomed like a predator in shadow. Knees trembling, they set foot on the walkway. The air felt thick with intangible energy. Placing the items in the center, they whispered, "Please, we ask your mercy. Spare our loved ones. Spare us from this doom." The wind gusted, swirling leaves around them. The metal rails groaned. For a moment, a fleeting shape seemed to flicker across the water's surface, an apparition of someone's face, twisted in anguish. Then all fell quiet. They waited, hearts pounding. The items lay still. No dramatic sign occurred. With shaky relief, they retreated, hoping it was enough. But in the pit of her stomach, Nova feared it might be too simple. The worst might still come. For a few days, an odd calm settled, giving them hope. Lena's fiancé recovered smoothly. Nova's mother stabilized in the hospital, and nightmares lessened. They dared to believe they'd appeased the curse. They even felt a rush of optimism that their offering had ended the cycle. They resumed daily routines, though weariness never fully left their eyes. Then, without warning, tragedy struck in a sudden, merciless blow. Late on a stormy afternoon, Lena's fiancé was involved in a massive collision on the newly opened highway bypass. He died at the scene. The news shattered Lena. Nova rushed to her side, heartbreak twisting her guts. Everyone blamed the slick roads or human error. But Nova saw the pattern. The bridge demanded the worst thing. The offering hadn't been enough. The unstoppable doom found them anyway. In grief, Lena withdrew, cursing the day she ever touched that cursed path. Meanwhile, Nova realized she, too, might be at risk. Her worst fear was losing her mother. She visited the hospital daily, praying the curse wouldn't claim another life. Days blurred in emotional torment. As her mother's condition worsened unexpectedly, Nova felt the bridge looming in her nightmares, mocking her attempts to outrun destiny. The doctors were perplexed by complications. Nova's mother, though stable for a time, took a turn for the worse. Nova decided she couldn't let fate snatch her mother away. She had one last desperate plan: confront the bridge at night, alone, and do whatever it took to break the cycle. Under a moonless sky, she returned to the forest, hooded jacket slick with cold rain. She trudged the path, the wind roaring among the pines. The sense of an unseen presence intensified. She reached the iron rails, the water below surging in the storm. She felt fear pounding in her chest, but she pressed on, stepping to the center, lighting her phone's flashlight. She faced the swirling darkness. "Please," she cried out, voice trembling, "take me instead, or end this. My mother is innocent." The wind howled, the metal beams rattling as though alive. In the reflection of the raging creek, she glimpsed flickers, faces twisted in terror, past victims, or illusions conjured by her fear. She closed her eyes, tears streaming. She offered up her life or begged to undo the crossing. Her voice echoed, lost in thunder. Suddenly, The water churned louder, the bridge shuddering. Nova's phone flickered out, leaving her in near blackness. A single crack of lightning illuminated a silhouette at the far end, impossible to discern if it was real or spectral. She stared, chest tight, as it slowly vanished. The entire bridge seemed to groan in a final, ear-splitting protest. She was thrown off her feet, landing on the slick walkway. When the storm subsided, Nova crawled back to the forest trail, half-dazed, her body bruised, mind numb. She found her phone lying in a puddle, destroyed. The bridge behind her was just as ominous, but the intense presence had receded. She made her way home, adrenaline spent. By morning, an urgent call from the hospital came. Her mother's condition had stabilized unexpectedly. A near miraculous recovery. Nova's heart soared with cautious relief. Could the bridge have accepted her pleas? But the cost hammered in soon after. The next day, Lena vanished without a trace, no notes, no phone signals, nothing. Nova's calls rang unanswered. Lena's fiancé had died, and now Lena was gone too. The police found her car abandoned near the forest, driver's door wide open. Search parties combed the area, but heavy rains hampered efforts. Days passed. No sign. The heartbreak was unstoppable. Nova realized with bitter despair that the curse might have claimed Lena's soul in the end. Or Lena, undone by grief, chose to face the bridge alone. Distraught, Nova confronted the possibility that the destiny conjured by crossing the bridge can shift from one victim to another, like a chain reaction. She considered returning to the site yet again. But fear weighed heavily. What if more tragedy blossomed? Time dulled the edges of heartbreak. Her mother, now healthy, moved to a rehab facility. Nova resumed half-hearted attempts at normal life, but her nights were tormented by visions of the iron rails and swirling waters. The once quiet rumor of the bridge was overshadowed by new accidents. Another local teen rumored to have tested the legend died in a freak cliff fall. The town hush deepened. One dusk, as Nova strolled along the outskirts, she glimpsed something in the forest path leading to the cursed crossing, a silhouette reminiscent of Lena's shape. She froze, heart pounding, calling out. The figure melted into the shadows. She rushed home, tears stinging, uncertain if she'd seen a ghost or a hallucination. In her living room, she discovered the door to a small cabinet left ajar inside. The personal items she'd offered on the bridge. She'd left them there long ago. One item was missing, Lena's old necklace. She found it later on her coffee table, drenched in swampy mud. No explanation. She sobbed, realizing the curse's tendrils might never release her. To this day, the Bridge of Dread remains largely unknown beyond Clearwood's borders. Some believe it's just a local rumor, but those who have set foot on its iron walkway know better. Nova warns newcomers quietly, don't cross it. No matter how curious you are, you will face your darkest fear. And it always takes a price. She carries the weight of that knowledge, haunted by the memory of Lena, and the knowledge that the fate she unleashed can't be undone with any mere apology. The bridging of destiny persists, feeding on mortal hope and dread. And so the old iron crossing endures, waiting in the forest gloom, each rivet steeped in sorrow, each step a step closer to your worst nightmare.